Clara, very nice to meet you again.
Hi, Fabian. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
To kick us off, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself and the work you do with Plug and Play?
Sure. So I started my career, well, I studied international relations, so nothing mobility related actually. And then I went into the business world. I did my master in management in Madrid, got into the finance world by joining an M&A boutique where I was basically looking into different deals in different stages from pre-seed to Series C, as well as some real estate deals. And then while being there, I had the opportunity to join a startup. So I went into the, let's say, the other side of the table as like the first employee of a renewable energy startup based in the Canary Islands. That was a very good learning experience of like things you should be doing, things you shouldn't be doing when it comes to building a company from scratch, and about how difficult it is to scale some specific models. So back then, COVID started and COVID restrictions were like heavily impacting the industry and our company. So I decided to go back to the investor side by joining Plug and Play. That was 4 years ago. I joined the vendors team, the mobility team in particular. And there, basically, what I do, what I've been doing for these last 4 years, is looking for potential investments for Plug and Play in the mobility space, pre-seed, seed, and Series A startups, and as well as helping our corporate partners with their innovation needs. So basically, Plug and Play is the largest corporate innovation platform. We work with big corporations and we look for startups that can provide them with the solutions, the technological solutions they're looking for, right? So in the mobility space, we work mostly with car manufacturers. We meet with them every week. We hear what needs they have, what kind of things they're looking for, and then we search for startups that can help them with those innovation needs or those pain points. So since I joined, I've been actively participating or involved in around 15 investments, as well as working with around 20 corporate partners in the automotive space. Yeah, that's a bit about Plug and Play and about my role there.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for the overview. To use this as an anchor and kick us off a little bit broader, looking at the automotive and mobility space from an investment point a little bit more broadly. You've done this job for a number of years now. What are and we've had a pandemic and all sorts of other events in between. What would you say has changed over the past couple of years, and what are the big trends as relates to automotive and mobility investments from the VC side that you see at the minute?
Yeah, I would say so. The overall VC landscape has been changing a lot. When I joined in 2021, and there was like a hype, like everyone was crazily investing. It was so easy to raise money for startups, so we did an incredible number of investments that year. I thought that was the standard thing because it was my first year in the VC world, but then it wasn't, of course. So after 2021, things went down, things slowed down. It was way more difficult to raise money. Investors were a bit more cautious, let's say. When it comes to mobility in particular, say so before joining Plug and Play, I remember there was a lot of money being invested in mobility services, mobility solutions like car sharing, ride hailing, micromobility. That was around 2019, 2018. And then COVID hit, supply chain disruptions started. So around 2021, 2022, everyone was looking for things related to supply chain management, semiconductors. So every year there's like a hot topic where all our corporate partners are requesting things around, right? So I would say that was 2020, 2021, 2022. And then right now, everything is around AI, so generative AI. And again, what I would say we've seen this year in 2024 and what we expect to see in 2025 is a sort of re-emergence of autonomous mobility. For, I would say, 2-3 years, we weren't receiving that many requests related to sensors. Our radar was something from like about 4 years ago. And now it seems there's like a second wave of interest in autonomous mobility. Actually, I was looking at the numbers yesterday in Pittsburgh, and it's interesting how the number of deals in when it comes to autonomous mobility actually decreased in 2024 compared to 2023, but the amount of capital invested increased from 8 billion to 20 billion, meaning there's more later stage rounds, more, which is usually like a sign of maturity in a sector. And basically what I was saying about like ride hailing, micromobility solutions, it decreased, like basically did the opposite. So from going from 20 billion in 2018 to 2 billion in 2024. So that's something interesting. And then, of course, not a surprise, but if you look at AI solutions in the auto industry, the numbers are actually very similar to the autonomous mobility. So going from around 8 billion to 20 billion in 2024. So I would say AI and autonomous mobility are now like the hot topics when it comes to startups and VC investment.
Fascinating. I really appreciate the overview. Sticking to this topic of AI, maybe specifically Gen AI investments in auto and mobility, what are some of the conversations that you currently see are happening in the industry as it relates to startup VC investments? And what are some of the, I guess, questions that you and your team receive from the corporate side around problems they are trying to solve?
So I would say from the corporate side, what we are receiving is a lot of requests related to how to make the whole manufacturing process more efficient, how to reduce costs. I would say that's probably related with the sort of crisis or the increase of the competitivity in the automotive space, which is leading to some like layoffs and just like struggle in the industry in general. And this is leading all these major players to try to find solutions and ways of reducing costs. So anything related to like AI for designing cars, AI for making the whole process more efficient of like iterations when it comes to designing different models, maybe even solutions, robotics solutions for making the whole like manufacturing process cheaper. That's something our partners are requesting a lot. And of course, all these robotics, they want them to be as clever, as smart as possible. So all of them need some AI on their systems. And generative AI is playing a key role when it comes to, for instance, humanoids, which we are seeing a sort of boom also in humanoids. A lot of automotive companies investing in humanoid startups or developing their own humanoids like Tesla. So that's something there. I would say there's also a lot of interest in more like, I'd say maybe short-term use cases, which would be more on the enterprise side of things, back end. So interest in like HR solutions, AI agents for sales. So I think AI is going to have like an impact. It's quickly going to have an impact in the way we buy cars and OEMs or dealers sell cars, right? So that's more like an easier adoption probably. And anything related to AI in the back end, procurement, things like that's also interesting from both like the VC perspective and the OEMs.
Reflecting on, so we're about, I guess, sort of 2 years in maybe into sort of Gen AI and automotive and mobility on a sort of more prominent scale. If you would sort of reflect on the past 2 years and how successful some of these collaborations between startups and corporate are, what would you say went well and what could be improved? Just to, while you sort of think about that and to contextualize my question a little bit more, some of these startups that you alluded to before around sensors, ADAS systems, they seem to be a little closer to what manufacturers are doing in a way anyway, just not as specialized and not as potentially robust as needed for some of the autonomous driving use cases. Whereas this type of Gen AI work, at least from my perspective, seems in many respects very disruptive and needs to be very well integrated into lots of the existing processes you mentioned. HR process changes, design changes, engineering changes, manufacturing assist changes, that can be quite profound in terms of the implications for the individuals that work in these organizations. And also from, I guess, a cultural standpoint in terms of how some of these startups work and then some of the corporates work from just culturally, they can be quite different, while they now have to collaborate very closely to bring these Gen AI solutions to life in a successful way. So what would you say, how are these collaborations going between startups and corporates, specifically as it relates to Gen AI?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And actually, this is something we have been facing. Like, let's say it's a challenge that we've been facing at Plug and Play in every sector, every vertical, not just like AI or generative AI, but when it comes to, so startups and big corporations are like different animals, let's say, with different nature, and the rhythm, the speed at which they work and the way they work is different, right? So it's like a whole learning experience from both sides when it comes to working on a pilot project or starting like a collaboration. I would say that's part of the magic of Plug and Play, the fact that we provide the tools for both the startup and the corporate to start working together. And in particular, so when it comes to, I would say one of our strengths is actually getting the startup in front of the right people from the corporation, right? The innovation team, the people from the business unit that is actually having that specific problem and they are willing to start working with the startups. They have the budget, they know how to work with them, and they've been part of our ecosystem for a while. So they've been talking to startups plenty of times, and we've sort of done this job of training them on how to work with startups. So our, let's say, success is when a pilot project or a proof of concept or any sort of partnership between the startup and the corporate happens. So we also work for that. We provide support on the implementation of the pilot if needed. And I think Plug and Play there plays a key role. When it comes to, in particular, generative AI, I would say that's right. Like there's some specific challenges associated to these, and you were talking about the culture, you were talking about different stuff. I would say I was talking with some of our partners last week at CES, and they were saying one of the main struggles is actually data. So they don't have like the data prepared to be used by all these generative AI startups right away, right? So there's some work that needs to be done in advance in order to be ready to implement, to integrate all these different solutions. Same with also sort of related to data, but like when it comes to regulations, compliance, so things they have to make sure they accomplish with before sharing all this data with an external party, right? So there's some, let's say, cybersecurity compliance concerns there that may be a hurdle when it comes to implement AI solutions. Overall, I think these two are the main ones. When it comes to like actions, I have to be completely transparent. This is something relatively new when it comes to, so we've seen a boom of requests around AI and generative AI, but when it comes to actions, it takes time. OEMs are usually slow when it comes to innovation. We try to work on this from Plug and Play, but it's usually like sales cycles when it comes to working with OEMs are slow. It takes time for them to actually jump into a pilot project usually. So right now, I don't have like specific examples of like success stories with Gen AI startups, but that can be also an insight, right? So it takes time. Yeah. That would be.
Just building on that last aspect, do you see any particular gaps on either side of the table? For example, either in terms of startups that are currently offering interesting solutions that automotive OEMs currently aren't looking into, but probably should, or on the other side, do you see problems on the corporate side, on the OEM side, if we stick to automotive manufacturers for now, that could be potentially solved using Gen AI, maybe specifically coming from, as you alluded to, sort of an outside speedboat almost, that could tackle that problem that's currently not really being worked on in a way that could be used?
Yes, so let me think about it. I'm sure there's things. I would say usually if the startup is doing something that the partners are not looking for, is not a good sign. Like sometimes
Mm.
we love a startup, we love the founders, we just vibe with the founders and we like the passion they are putting in it. But then so part of our due diligence is actually introducing startups to the corporate partners, right? So whenever we are considering a potential investment, we will always try to make as much introductions as we can to our corporate partners. On the one side, to provide value to the startup, on the other side, to basically get the feedback from the corporates, which would be in the end the potential, like the buyer or the partner, right? So when we do that and partners are not interested in that solution, it's usually not a good sign for us. It doesn't mean maybe the product is not good. It means maybe Plug and Play is not the right investor because we wouldn't provide that much value because the corporates we work with are not interested in that. So I would say usually corporations are aware of their needs they have, the pain points they have. It's hard to just come. Sometimes it has happened that we just randomly come across something that maybe partners were not asking for. And then when they see it, they love it. And that happened recently with a solution about procurement, actually, with one of our corporate partners. And I think that's the only one I remember, like a recent one. But in general, it's more they stick to the problems that they know they have, to what their business units are asking for, right? And then when it comes to like requests from our corporate partners that we're struggling to find startups that can provide that, there's a lot actually. Sometimes it's like super niche, super specific requests that there's no one doing that. Or if there's someone, it's already like a big corporation. And that's usually, sometimes we have to say this, like there's no startups doing this because it's not a sort of startup business that you will easily find like funding because maybe VCs are not interested in this, like a specific hardware component, right? But then we have to say, okay, all these big corporations are doing this and you could be interested. But I remember recently one of our partners was asking for solutions that are able, like AI solutions that can read CAD files and basically extract information and be able to not to say like which materials will be needed and how much that will cost. So basically from a CAD file be able to extract all this data. And I was struggling to find startups doing that, for instance. So that's an example.
You mentioned a couple of times there that the issue of value is really important, so delivering value from these, in your case, investments. Are there some... and this is a topic that's very close to my heart and something that we struggle with over and over as relates to some of the, for example, customer-facing solutions. So some of these GenAI solutions might improve our either employee experience or our customer experience, which is inherently hard in a lot of cases to articulate in a financial value metric. I was just wondering if there are any particular lessons learned, reflections that you could share as it relates to the conversation around value of some of these investments, given that in your case, I could assume it is usually a monetary exchange that happens when they look into entering some of these collaborations with startups.
So, sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sorry. As it relates to articulating the value of startup investments in the GenAI space, are there any particular, I guess, that you would have for startups that would like to, whether these innovations come from externally in form of a startup or within an organization from a business unit that works on GenAI solutions, as it relates to articulating the value of some of these GenAI solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably so one of the main drivers, like in any sector, any companies actually cost reduction or revenue increase, right? So anything that is able to when you're selling, when you're trying to approach a corporation, I think bringing some numbers to the table and being clear on like what the impact is gonna be in your operations, in your cost, in your revenue. That's for sure very important. I would say when it comes to Gen AI, so I remember partners mentioning that they are not just looking for solutions that can speed specific processes or can like increase the speed of a specific processes or just maybe reduce the number of employees you need for doing something, but maybe solutions that can come up with new ideas, with new things. So it's not just making what humans are able to do, but in like a shorter period of time, but it's more like bringing new things to the table, right? So that's also something interesting when it comes to articulating or when it comes to building your narrative of what the startup is able to do. Not sure if that helps.
Yeah, no, no. I think it's really important to be very, very clear for, because I guess what we always have to bear in mind is who's the customer and who's the decision maker of these solutions. And in a lot of cases, the decision makers are directors across all of the different functions that, exactly as you alluded to, have an interest in keeping manufacturing plants running at high efficiencies, in speeding up design and engineering processes in the customer space, and improving the customer experience, retention, margins, etc. And if we look at these metrics as a starting point and trying to articulate that, I think that's very good advice. Building on that and sort of looking ahead, lots of these solutions, as you alluded to, are sort of in the short to medium term space. You mentioned some HR solutions, some sort of process improvements here and there, some sort of reasonably basic, I think it's fair to say, chatbot solutions. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you, and I know it's sort of a difficult, little bit speculative question, but is there anything sort of over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years on the horizon that you would see as possible development in the space in terms of what startups could be working on in the future, or what, on the flip side, corporates might be looking to solve on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I think we haven't talked about one of the main things, which is how Gen AI can impact autonomous mobility. And that's, of course, sort of the elephant in the room when it comes to talking about AI and Gen AI in the automotive sector. So I am pretty excited about this. I don't know if the time frame is going to be 5 to 10 years or actually shorter. I believe we're seeing a lot of companies already building these sort of end-to-end AI models for autonomous mobility. We've been in touch with Wabi, a company from Canada. Well, actually, the founder is from Spain. But that's a very cool company. I love the approach. And I think the idea, the main fundamental behind what they are doing is that they want generative AI to be like a human brain, right? It's not about having a lot of sensors and high precision maps. It's about having an AI system based in generative AI, which is able to directly issue you like driving instructions from camera images, right? So that's I think very exciting. And that's basically also like the main thing. I remember there's another company from Japan called Turing, which has like a very interesting approach. It's very similar to Wabi, but they basically say that what is needed for autonomous driving is not good eyes, but good brains, right? So I think that approach is exciting, and that's what is a bit more. I wouldn't say it's like long term or just like hypothetical. It's actually there, but I think it's gonna have like a great impact in the way we move. I think at the same time, all these autonomous mobility development are gonna have an impact on what I was talking at the beginning, which is all these ride-hailing, car-sharing solutions. One of the reasons why money is not going into these kind of companies anymore is basically because they struggle with the unit economics, they struggle with profitability. So I think that the need is there, the demand is there, in particular in Europe. I'm from Barcelona. I was always using mopeds, like sharing motorbikes around the city. It's the most convenient way to move around. And I think it makes a lot of sense, but they struggle when it comes to making the business profitable, right? Probably because the approach initially was about like expansion, growing, getting into all the markets and becoming the main player instead of maybe looking a bit more into the unit economics. But in general, like any ride-hailing, car-sharing solution struggles with profitability. It's like an asset-heavy model. Also, I think VCs were investing in those companies as if they were investing in software, and it's not a software company, right? But I think autonomous mobility is going to have like a real impact there too. So the main goal is actually to these cars to be able to just move around without a driver, which is the main cost these companies have, right? This is already happening here in San Francisco, and it's amazing, and it's crazy the amount of Waymos that you see around. And it so has, I would say, the integration, like the public acceptance. At the beginning it was a bit tough. Right now it's so, like, people are so used to see Waymos. When I saw the first one, I was taking pictures all the time. I was like so like going crazy, and then you realize you're using them, you're not impressed anymore by seeing a car without a driver, and humans just get used to it, and they are part of our daily life so quickly.
Specifically, in a lot of cases, I guess the senior stakeholders on the corporate side, like automotive OEMs, are your customers. So if you would or could give them very open and honest feedback and recommendations as relates to startup investments, maybe specifically, given that, as you alluded to, it's an area of high interest around AI, Gen AI investments, what would be your recommendations to these, your honest recommendations to decision makers as relates to Gen AI startup investments?
So I would say it depends, because it depends. So if we talk about investments, it's hard because the VC perspective is different to the corporation perspective, right? So VCs, we mostly look for financial returns, while corporations may look for strategic partnerships and investments, maybe in startups that can provide some value beyond just financial return. So it's a different advice I would give. So we have our own, let's say, internal guidelines when it comes to investing in a startup. We want to see some specific skills in the founders, like a specific even like attitude or just like uniqueness. We want to see they move fast. We want to see like different things that maybe from a corporation perspective you don't care that much about the charisma, I don't know how to say it, but the way the founder explains what they are doing. For instance, I think I love when a technical founder is able to explain in a very simple terms what they are doing, right? So I'm not technical, and a lot of VCs aren't, and we really appreciate, and that actually shows something from the founder that we like. But maybe for a corporation, they love like technicalities, and the more technical you are, the better, and they don't care that much about how fast you move, or well, that they may, but like about things when it comes to selling and having like traction and being able to start like different pilot projects with different corporations. Maybe they want exclusivity and they want that partner to be the only seller for them, right? So I think it's hard to give advice because we have like different approaches when it comes to investing. What I would say, and sometimes it's hard for us because from an investment perspective, we look into pre-seed and seed companies mostly. Series A has been like a sort of like new approach that we are taking through some of our funds. But traditionally, Plug and Play has been more into pre-seed and seed. And our corporate partners, they like to engage with a bit more mature companies. That's something I would say they should work on, because sometimes they just miss great opportunities of working with amazing founders that are doing great things because they want some like sort of references, and I understand that, like if you're a corporation, you want to make sure you're betting in the right founder or the right startup, and you want to see some proof of that. So I understand it. I would say maybe being a bit more open when it comes to working with early stage founders, that they need this sort of first vote of confidence, right? So that would be maybe one advice I would give.
Two final follow-up questions on one on the corporate and one on the startup side. On the corporate side, you alluded to that you as a VC have slightly, I guess, different objectives in some cases when it relates to these investments. And you mentioned that corporates are looking for, in a lot of cases, specifics beyond immediate financial returns. Just to unpicked it a little bit, I could imagine that some factors are around capability building, etc. But what are some of the other factors that your clients or automotive OEMs in general are looking for in terms of startup investments that aren't necessarily short to medium term financial returns?
Yeah. So I would say sometimes it's a pretty like straightforward things. Like maybe they wanna see companies that are basically doing things in the fields they operate. So sometimes they have like very clear guidelines, or like we're interested in like energy management, in fleet management, and this and this is like, okay, you have to. This is a bit more like a sector restriction, I would say. Then when it comes to funders, I would say sometimes, as I said, like they want to see like a proper technical background behind. They would usually bring all their technical team into the first call or the second call and try to make as many questions as they have, and a bit of like challenging the funder when it comes to the technology itself. So sometimes they have like restrictions when it comes to where the founders are located. They wanna that's something that we've seen at Plug and Play, and we don't mind. We invest worldwide and we don't have any sort of geographical restriction, but these corporations, they may want to be able to work with a startup physically, right, in the same place. They want to work together, they want to start a pilot, and they want to know them in person, and they want to be able to have them by their side. So that's something that they also may be requiring, and that's something that Plug and Play is actually helping with when it comes to maybe. So we have in our building here in Sunnyvale, we have corporations that are renting space, and we have startups that are renting space there too. So it's a sort of we work for corporations and startups where they share space and they are able to work together. So that's something that they look for. Yeah, I think those are some of the ideas or things that I see that they are interested in. But again, it varies a lot. It changes depending on the corporation. They are looking for different things. We have some corporates that are looking for investments, but we have a lot of corporates that are just looking for partnerships and like more on the business strategic side of things. We also have like different like companies from Japan, we have companies from Europe, we have companies from the US, and culture also plays a key role there. The way the Japanese corporations interact with startups is different of the way that US corporations interact with startups. And there's also language barrier there. There's a lot of things that come into the equation.
I remember a TED Talk from a number of years ago, which was called something along the lines of the number one reason why startups succeed, which I'm not sure you know it. I think it was from one of the universities, whether it was HBS or one of the others in the United States. And the researcher or professor basically looked into sort of different factors that might influence startup success around financial resources, the idea, the founding team, etc. All of the aspects you mentioned. Essentially concluded that the number one factor is around timing as it relates to what I would like to do. Which leads me to my, I promise, final question. And you covered on or touched on a couple of these aspects, but to, I guess, give the question the attention it deserves, what are you looking for in startups, maybe founders specifically? Maybe if you could touch on it specifically related to automotive investments.
Yeah. I would say, so first of all, we look for like uniqueness when it comes to founders. We invest so early that we usually say it's a team bet, right? It's more on the people than on the product. Of course, product is important, but the main driver, the main thing we look at is the people. So who's the CEO, who's the CTO, how do they complement each other, how do they interact? So that's also very important during the call. Are they fluently pitching, or are they just jumping into each other's? And of course, if you come from, like, if your background is a solid background, like an impressive background, that's for sure like an asset. And if you come from like a good university, if you come from startup in the mobility space and you were there when the team was just like 2, 3, 5 people, and then you were there during the whole like growth of the company, that's of course a great thing. If you are a previous founder, of course that's But it's not only about having a great background. With one of our latest investment in the mobility space, a company called Kathler, the founder was 16 years old when he actually founded the company. He dropped out like high school. He raised 5 million from one of the best VCs in Spain. And that's, of course, there's no background there. It's just the feeling and the vibe of the founder and how like impressive he is when it comes to explaining what they do and the passion. And basically that's probably like a 1 in a million cases, right? It's not the common thing, but that's, at least for me, that's one of the most exciting startups that I've invested in and one of the most exciting founders I've seen around. And what I want to say with this is just that it doesn't matter if you don't come from the best university or if you don't have like 3 exits in your previous lives. It's fine. It's just a matter of the way you talk about what you're doing, the way you explain, the way you present yourself and your vision and your basically approach to the problem you're trying to solve, right? So I think the team is the most important thing when it comes to investment on our side. And then, of course, there's other things. We want to see there's a fit again with what our corporate partners are looking for. So when, as I said before, we try to make introductions to our corporate partners from the beginning for both like showing the value we can bring, but also for getting feedback. We try to see if there's like if how big the market is. So of course we do our work, we do our due diligence and market sizing. And I think that's like all the conversations we have with our corporate partners on a weekly basis are very helpful for us to assess all these different opportunities, right? So when I started at Plug and Play 4 years ago, I had like zero background on mobility again. And that was like a whole learning experience of getting to understand what the automotive industry is about, what kind of struggles, what kind of challenges they have. And now I'm able to, just by talking to a founder and hearing what they're working on or what they plan to do, I can say if that's something that is going to resonate with what our partners are looking for, and therefore it's going to be like a potential investment for us or not.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for your time and insights today, Clara.
Thank you very much, Fabian.